Really, they're given without substantiation, and really most of them are very stupid, as we'll see. And of course, one of the easiest ones is the relationship between Christianity and slavery, and this was raised by a couple of people in the comments section, I think, on the first one, which is the Why I Waste My Time with Atheists. Slavery was brought up, and may have been brought up on the other one as well. First of all, there were some quotes that were given from the Old Testament, and I won't be addressing those in this video because, if you think that those are applicable, then you have, you don't have an understanding of Christianity that it is, worth my while to spend time explaining, because it's very, even a basic understanding of the contents of Christianity, how Christians traditionally view the Bible, and so on, will tell you that quoting, from Leviticus on rules involving slavery is a bit silly. And Ephesians 6:5 says this: "Bondservants," and that's often translated as slaves. I'm reading from, by the way, the Orthodox Study Bible, and they use the New King James Version for the New Testament translation in this particular version. So the New King James Version has bondservants, but other translations have slaves. Really, it's the same word in Greek. "Bondservants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart, as to Christ." And so that was quoted, right? But apparently whoever quoted that forgot to read the rest of the verse, or what follows in the succeeding verses. So this is Ephesians 6 through 9, the verses that follow immediately after that. "Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord, whether he is a slave or free. And you, masters, do the same things to them, giving up threatening, knowing that your own master," and master with a capital M, that's God, "also is in heaven, and there is no partiality with him." Now, to quote that as, look at how horrible Christianity is, here it is endorsing slavery, is completely and utterly absurd, and what it tells me is that you're proof texting and you're not reading and you're not understanding what you're reading if you're reading, and so you should boost your intelligence before you get involved in these kind of discussions. Note what St. Paul is doing here. Whether he is a slave or free, he will receive the same from the Lord, he says in verse 8. And so he's putting slave and free on equal footing before God. Now, I think it's things like in England in, I believe it was 1102, you find laws that actually oppose slavery. As early as 1102 in England, you find a law that opposes slavery and drawing on Judeo-Christian tradition for doing so. And you find, of course, even those places where slavery is practiced, that slaves have rights, because slaves are human beings. Why are they human beings? Because they were created in the image and likeness of God. Genesis. Opening chapters of Genesis. And then you find, of course, the rise of the African slave trade, which would later become the transatlantic slave trade. And this is the early modern era, 15th century and on, more or less, basically with the discovery of America. But of course, Islam the Muslims pioneered the African slave trade, and Europeans picked it up from that. And that's what you find this interesting thing in England, where, you know, as early as the early 12th century, they're condemning slavery, and then even in the 16th century, you find them condemning a case of slavery. You know, that somebody moved to England with a slave, and they said, well, no, this slave was automatically free as soon as he hit English shore. But then you find, because of this influence from the Islamic African slave trade, and of course the desire for cheap, easy labor in the New World, you find this kind of backtracking on European law to some extent, but there's still this underlying current of opposition to slavery. And so this transatlantic slave trade, it doesn't last very long compared to the wider scope of history. Now, it had a major impact, of course. It still has a major impact, especially in America, but it doesn't last very long when we're looking at the wider scope of history. And there was always this uneasiness with slavery. If you read, you know, documents related to slavery from this period, there's a definite uneasiness there. Definite uneasiness. And then we find, with the rise of a definite abolitionist movement, especially in the 18th and the 19th centuries, you find people like William Wilberforce, who was a devoted Christian. Of course, if you've seen the movie Amazing Grace, that's about William Wilberforce, Amazing Grace. He was a definite, you know, he was a major voice in the anti-slave movement in Britain. And then you find the same thing in America. You know, there had always been an uneasiness with slavery, and you find that, you know, very far back. And you know, we can examine the documents, but it's, you know, kind of beside the point.